Now I would like to bring up on the stage writer-director Leena Pendharkar. And producer Jane Kelly Kosek. And actor Amir Arison.
Hello.
Hello. First of all, thank you all for coming. And we'll do a Q&A, but I'm going to lead off with a couple of provocative questions. First of all, I want to let you know that it's a beautiful film, visually, and that an amazing amount of the beauty is in between the dialogue, in between the words, in between the action. And it's stunning on so many levels.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. What gave birth to this film?
Well, I was pregnant with my second daughter, and very much like in the film, at the 20-week scan, the doctor came in and she was actually shaking. My husband and I were like, okay. She was shaking, and she basically said, I'm really sorry to let you know there's a serious issue with your daughter, and we have to discuss how you want to go down this path. And it was the next 20 weeks were pretty stressful. I went through an amnio. I had to go in for sonograms. But as I was going through it, there was just such little information about this. Like, well, what happens when a baby is diagnosed with a health condition halfway through? It's not a subject that people talk about. And naturally, I was like Googling and trying to find information, and there was really nothing. And so your mind just kind of takes you in places that you wish it wouldn't, And partly as I was thinking about it, I was like just so surprised at how little has been talked about in that subject. We talk about abortion as a very black and white issue, that it's either you're terminating, you're keeping, or people talk about late-term abortion. And I personally think the men who are making rules about late-term abortion don't even know what the fuck it is. But so as I was thinking about it, it was just a very human story for me because I was living it, and I wanted to explore that gray area where people don't talk about, that's a subject that people don't talk about.
And Amir, how familiar were you before this film with women's health issues and it's not a j'accuse question, but to immerse yourself in the life of someone who's doing just the same. Talk a little bit about the process and how you work together with your...
Well, I had a great resource. Leena did go through it. So also Sanvi, her daughter, who was born and is amazing, and they got through. I hope it's okay if I say that. She was in the movie, actually. And so she was around a lot, as well as Amit, her husband. And I use those as great resources, actually. Asked him what he was through. He's also a designer, and Ronan's a graphic designer, and I really wanted to know about that and how he thinks and stuff. So I really leaned on them as big resources. My writer-director, her daughter, and her husband. I didn't know too much about it. I've never gotten anyone pregnant that I'm aware of. Had some scares. So I've gone down that road that Ronan does. Too much information.
Well, one thing I just want to point out is that we've gotten a lot of comments about how, like a couple of journalists, like male journalists, were like, gosh, man, when I saw the movie, I was really nervous because that's kind of how I acted it sometimes. Like, I was kind of a jerk in certain moments. And, I think in a way, I didn't want that character to be this big jerk, but I think I wanted both characters to express the way that men and women feel about going into that phase of their lives.
I didn't. I also, entering into it, I felt like Ronan was doing research, and she said that she went on Facebook groups for support, so I looked those up as we're doing those scenes in the movie because there's new information in him to kind of look at some of those pictures. Those pictures are enough to feed that scene. Look at this, and then you decide. So, stuff like that.
And Jane, where in the process of all of this did you come in? Had you read the script before?
I actually was at the initial idea phase. Leena reached out. We had been doing projects together for a couple of years prior, and we wanted to do a full feature together. And she reached out and said, hey, I want to talk to you about an idea that I have. So we sat down and had lunch, and she told me about it. And this was really the first time that I had heard that she and Amit had gone through this, because during the pregnancy she didn't tell anyone. And they were all alone. And when she was telling me this, I just felt like it came from such an honest and emotional place. And I've never been pregnant, I don't have kids, but I knew that it was a universal story that everyone is touched by, and I thought that would make a great feature. And so I supported the whole venture.
I think one of the great strengths of your film is that it is not a woman's film or a couple's film. It's a human film.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'd like to open it up for questions. Comments?
I mean, I wrote this as kind of, like I said, to explore the gray area of abortion and what happens, what can happen to a couple when they have to go through something this challenging. And you know, I think even if it wasn't totally my ending, I mean, my relationship with my husband really suffered, and we're still really trying to pull ourselves out from some of the things that we experienced. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because we've been traveling all over the country with the film, and we were in places like Wichita and Indianapolis and Naples, and someone in Naples, Florida, like raised their hand and said, "This is a pro-life film, you know, this is all about pro-lifers." And I was like, okay, you can see it that way if you'd like. So hopefully people take away whatever they see.
I really appreciate that you made this film, because nobody's really talking about this, and I've never seen it, and I could, you know, thought about it, and then some scares, but I haven't seen it on film. One scene stood out to me when she left Roman at the baby store. Did that come from any truth?
Actually, no, it didn't come from the truth. Yeah, it was like...
I have to say something about that scene. I remember when we were doing it, I was so certain Ronan was in the right. You know, and just how things were going and built it. You really have to build your character, and, and watching it, I'm like, you fucking asshole. I'm like, you know, so it's, that's sort of, I think, some of the magic in the movie is, you know, things that people are trying to communicate with each other but can't because they're trying to take care of their feelings, and then you push them down, and then out comes the asshole. But they haven't dealt with things themselves, so they're working it out, and she's working it out, and he's working it out. So I thought that scene was a great example of that, and just not knowing how to communicate with someone you love, nor yourself, sort of huge things that they're going through.
I have to say that one of the strongest and most deeply felt parts of your work in the film was, to me, was seeing Ronan realize who he is and what he is or isn't capable of, and to watch that discovery. Thank you so much for that.
Ooh, that's nice. Thank you. We talked a lot about that, a lot, because I really was concerned, and thank you for your question too. We talked, I was like, when I first got the script, I right away, I hate to say it, it's funny that I identified with Maya. I was like, I see her point of view clearly. So we talked a lot about it, really wanted to add the aspect of financial stress and American masculinity, and make sure that there's some benchmarks of society stress and man stress that sort of shadows his, and of course I could really relate to diving in oh, we'll get married, let's have a kid, sort of projecting this vision of yourself and then kind of facing that reality, and no one even thinks about when something goes wrong. So I really, 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 really wanted to work hard on that, and we talked for a long time about that, about him not being sort of just a, like she says, an asshole or an obstacle to this woman who is a survivor. And the fact that he makes, I really tried to build, and we talked so much about this, he really does make sort of, for lack of a better word, a truthful choice, but a cowardly choice. And you know, most...
but I think an honest choice in a lot
Exactly.
of ways. And like, I didn't want this character to be a demon, but because I think in all honesty, there's something really real and honorable about someone who just decides that they can't handle something, you know.
Exactly.
And so I didn't want him to come off as this.
He gets to his truth. But to get to a truth that's sort of a lesser hopeful truth than sort of my strength truth was, the character goes from yeah to fuck. I'm not as brave as I thought I was, but at least I'm being real now. So to go this way as opposed to this way, like so many characters do, was delicate, and it was one of the reasons I wanted to do it, because it was a real challenge.
Well, we watch you come to that place rather than you telling us, that rather than the character. So your collaboration really, again, gave birth to something really quite lovely.
Cool.
Thank you. More questions?
I have a question about that. First of all, it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
I was just wondering about the, did you know that you wanted to tell the story out of sequence? Or was that something you discovered in the editing, or was that always your intention?
That was always my intention, actually. It's pretty much edited the exact way that it was written. I mean, the opening changed a little bit, but I knew that I wanted to tell it out of sequence because, I mean, I kind of just conceived of it that way, as I wanted this kind of love story and romance to unfold as we see the pregnancy unfold, and how like juxtaposing those two things against one another to heighten the tension.
I have to say that was a big draw for me when I saw the script too, because it was very clear, even though you're bouncing around all kinds of timelines and so forth, it was very, very clear to me, and I thought that was fun. I hadn't seen that on film before.
I saw a question over there.
Oh yeah, I was gonna just say that was, you did an awesome job, and Leena's sister, and so really proud. I was just curious to see that, I guess like my question would be like when you were sharing like such an intimate personal story like that, were there things that you learned about yourself or viewpoints that you saw like throughout the film that changed kind of your perception of how you may have thought through any kind of part of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it was scary to put such a personal story out there, you know, and I was, at first, you know, when you go through this kind of birth complication, I think there's a lot of shame. Like, I think a lot of women blame themselves, like, what did I do wrong? Why did my pregnancy go wrong? What happened? And for a long time, I felt really depressed about that. Like, maybe something was wrong with me, maybe I did something wrong. And it was really painful in a way. And I just felt like, you know, I just can't, I walked around for the first year of like, maybe, you know, maybe it was me, you know, all my fault. But in a way, as I started to put this story together, and the issue that my daughter had wasn't the same issues in the film, but kind of the mental process that Anna Margaret embodied was really, you know, accurate and interesting. But as I saw this, I've met a lot of people who come up and share their birth stories with me and the challenging things they went through, and in a way it's let me release some of that. You know, I'm protective of my daughter. Like, I've had some questions. I'm like, you know, my daughter's gonna grow up and she may watch this someday, and I never want her to think, you know, that for a moment that, you know, that I was scared to have her or anything. But I also hope people can watch this and feel like it's, you know, it's a complicated issue, that giving birth is not as black and white as people think. So that's been very cathartic for me, to meet other people and to be able to talk about it. Just from shooting the film, there was a lady who wrote me, who worked on the set with us. I think you forwarded me her message. She wrote me this long letter about how something terrible happened in her pregnancy and she had to terminate, and she's so shamed and she's never told anybody. And we had another actress actually on set who came up to me after the scene and said, you know, I just want you to know I went through the same thing, and I went through something really serious and I had to terminate. You know, and this has been really hard for me. And so that, for me, has been really cathartic, to like let it go. That like it wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything for that to happen, and that it's okay. You know, that like I can be okay. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, as the producer of a story that comes from out of a personal life event or personal life story, did you have fears that you would be working on a story where there was no distance, or that it would be, forgive the phrase, therapy rather than a film with a universal message?
You know, I didn't. That's a good question. I don't think I've ever thought of it that way. Mainly because I really trust in Leena's vision as a writer-director. I knew her so well at that point, and I knew that she was able to really tap into people's souls and work with wonderful actors like Amir and be able to, you know, help bring it out in a way that really works. So no, I didn't fear that. I was actually feeling really empowered by it, and also blessed that I could be there for Leena to help her tell this story, you know, because it is very personal. So you want to make sure that the writer-director has that person that he or she can lean on, and in those moments where it is hard, you know, for the writer-director to do that.
It gives it a certain honor, like a certain responsibility. It's not like, you know, it's not
Definitely.
some little rom-com you're going to go do and try to get some laughs or some shit.
Yeah, you're telling someone's story.
But yet it was not without humor, which was remarkable. And
I enjoy writing comedy. I mean, I went through a phase where I was writing a lot of funny stuff. So
She can let it rip, let me tell you.
When I first saw the film, almost every other scene that we shot, there was, you know, Anna Margaret is a great improviser. She can do comedy or drama, and we would just go, both drama and funny. So, and I remember being like, this is going to be so funny, that's going to work, right? And I first saw the movie, and like all of that was cut. Like, I was like, and it really affected me, and I was like, oh, Leena had a vision that was much sort of, you know, clearer and bigger than I ever saw. Because it was like to me, it was like a slow disintegration of relationship, and it was harder to watch. Anyway, so.
I remember in the kids scene, everyone was like, wait, but you didn't get that angle, you didn't get that angle. I was like, I'm not getting that angle. I don't have time for that. So I was like, I know I need to cut this together, so I just kind of have to move on.
the editing was fantastic. Did you hand over the material to your editor and say, do a first assembly and I'll come back and look?
And our editor was awesome. Jane brought him on from another project, and
Yeah, he's great.
he was very fast. Like during the, by the time we finished shooting, he put together an assembly. And then, for the next 4 months, I did sit with him in a room every day from 9 to 6, and we worked on it and really worked on it. And then the sound and music took about 4 or 5 more months. So.
Love the score.
Yeah, my husband is really a music person, and I asked him, could he suggest some temp? And we were just listening to a bunch of temp that he had suggested, and Kate Simcoe's temp we just kept using over and over again, and then Jane and I were like, we should just try to write her and see if she would do it. I mean, she's a pretty big DJ, producer. She's from the US, but she lives in the UK, and she's like in a different city in Europe every weekend getting paid big bucks to DJ. But we said, would you want to do something like this? And she was excited because she's trying to transition into scoring.
It felt like a very organic part of the film, the music. There was never too much, and yet there was nothing lacking.
Oh, thank you.
As well as the sound design was very beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I just like it. It feels like a European movie or something. It doesn't feel like a traditional American movie. She takes her time, and it's really, I just like it.
Thank you, Amir.
This is more common for the director than the actor. As a man, this movie really moved me, because it kind of shows, we should, keep our emotions a little bit lower for the ladies, especially because they're pregnant and, they have a whole seed in them. And so that definitely hit me, and hopefully I'll be mindful one day, And for the actor, I was on my feet like, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Sort of like that. So I thought you did a wonderful performance.
I find when I read the script, when I watch the movie, my allegiances shift, scene to scene, character to character, and it happens different times, and the different times. This is the third time I've seen the movie. So I think that's cool. It's hard. It's hard. It's painful.
Did you have your hand up as well? And then I'll get to it.
Just like to ask, what was the hardest scene you shoot and why? And maybe what was your favorite?
Tough question. A lot of fun scenes. For some reason, my favorite scene, to me, the clearest scene, Maya and is the car scene before they go into the baby shower. Just love doing that scene. We did it so many different ways, and all of them felt good, and just felt like we were cooking. I don't know, for some reason, every time I watch that scene, I'm like, I can't explain why. I just really like where Anna Margaret's character is and where Ronan's character is, and they are just getting more and more entrenched in their points of view, and it's starting to explode. I don't know. That was probably and the hardest scene to do. Gosh, let me think. I mean, that scene in the future when he's completely regretful. That was
a great performance.
That was a
beautiful.
Yeah. That wasn't just like show up to work.
That was a tough one because, I mean, we did this on a tiny budget, and this was like, I teach at a university, and they let me use the university cafe. However, we got there and they told us that they couldn't turn the fridge off.
Right. Yeah, it was kind of a nightmare.
And Jane and I were like, you know what, we'll just buy everything in the fridge, okay? Just like take it out, we'll buy it, put it on the credit card.
Right.
So that we could turn the thing off because it was loud.
And she was really protective of me, knowing that. It's like, that's not the type of scene you want to do like 20 times.
Yeah.
Or, and then do a wide and a close and a close. And she was really good about it. We're going, do you want to go first? Do you want, like, you go on either side. Do you want to go on your side first or your side second? She was really, really handheld me like a good little baby actor. You need it, and I appreciated it.
I think we have time for one more question.
I was going to say that I love what Amir said about how, your kind of allegiance to the characters changed every scene. And back when it started, I was kind of more thinking that the strong one would be Amir versus Anna Margaret, and I thought that was great. But I wondered, in your experience, you mentioned that your husband and daughter were on set, and I know your daughter is not old enough to have seen this, and that's your decision for later, but what does your husband think about the final cut?
I mean, I think it's still probably a little painful for him to watch at times. I mean, I think, like I was saying earlier, sometimes I've had this like really intense reaction from a lot of men where they're like, God, he's just such a jerk. And like my husband and really close friend, watched it at one point, and they were like, he is just an asshole, and he doesn't deserve to have this woman in his life. And but then other people see it and they're like, no, he's just conflicted, and I think it just depends on where you. I think what's been really cool for me is to see that like people have this like really range of emotions. Like when we were working on the rough cuts and stuff, everyone was like, we can't stand the Anna Margaret. She's awful. Like, what woman admits on film that she's afraid to have a baby? Like, that's not a normal thing to admit on film. And we really like had a hard time, like, because everybody would be like, we hate her in the reviews, and it's like, so we had to like go back and just kind of recut and reshape and rethink, and and finally I had to just live with like the fact that like maybe some people won't like her because she's really vocal about her discomfort and fear of having a baby, but that's part of her arc. So.
This is going to sound actory, but I knew there were a couple decisions, no matter how you play them, are going to come across as rough or jerk or a-hole, whatever, and there's an old sort of act. You can't judge your characters. You can like.
I think that's what made it so authentic and so real.
Yeah.
So, and don't be afraid to. You don't have to be likable. That's not necessarily interesting. Likability is a trick. It's a charm. Ironically, watching it when he's quote unquote more likable, I actually found it more annoying. I liked him more when he was an ass because he was real. He was being truthful. Just seeing that, I remember thinking I would like those scenes more, doing them, and vice versa, and seeing it. It's what do I know?
I know we don't have time for many more questions, so I'm going to ask the question that I know is on a lot of people's minds. I know people here, and I know I will be talking about this film to many people. I know you're still on the festival circuit. Are there plans for people who couldn't be here tonight or at any of the other festivals to see it?
Yeah, we are doing our VOD and theatrical release in April.
It'll be in 10 cities across
Yeah.
the U.S. We just got a deal.
Really exciting.
You know that?
That's your hope. So
Quick, what cities real quick?
we'll let you know. We'll send you the list
Wait,
when our
is-
distributor lets us know.
Is there a website where people can keep track of what's going on?
Yeah, we have a Facebook page, 20 Weeks Movie, and there's a website, 20 Weeks Movie.
Twitter and an Instagram.
Yeah, and actually, like, you know, if you enjoyed the film, it's really helpful for us if you come and join our Facebook page. If you write a positive review on IMDb, it's so hard for
If you
independent.
feel that way.
Yeah, if you feel that way. It's just hard for independent filmmakers to get the work out sometimes. But we've had a wonderful run, but yeah, it helps when people get out and talk about it.
It's one of those, if you see something you like, say something.
Please do, because
Right.
it really does help. It really does.
Thank you, and thanks everybody.